What's up, y'all? It's Dr. Paul with Liberty Hill Comics. The channel is where I share my passion and over 40 years experience comic book collecting, investing, and conservation with you. This is episode 9 for this copy of America's Best Comics number 12 from January 1945, the golden age of comic books. And today we're going to review the results of mending the obverse of the cover with Japanese Tengujo paper and wheat paste, and we're going to trim the cover. Sincerely thank you for joining me today. I appreciate all of the viewers, but especially those that take the time to like, subscribe, and comment on the video. By way of summary for this project, we're using my 9-step comic book conservation process. Not all comic books require all 9 steps, and we determined this book only needed 6 of the 9. We already performed the assessment, dry cleaning, and the wet cleaning and chemical stabilization on the cover and first wrap. And then we did glue removal and began physical stabilization on this cover. Specifically, in episodes 7 and 8, we mended the 2 halves of the cover and all of the loose bits of paper from the glue removal back into one cohesive piece of paper. Today, in episode 9, we'll review the results and trim the book. We'll finish the rest of the steps in future episodes, and we'll wrap up with a summary video when we're all done. I've pulled the cover from my Seal Masterpiece 350 that I'm using as a cold press. Here are some images showing you old frogmouth. The platen is huge at 32 by 26 inches. You can literally press 6 comic books at a time or a concert poster in this vintage beast that I picked up used and I restored. I have an 1/8 inch thick aluminum plate that I use to conveniently stage items for press and move items into and out of the press. When I'm working on Golden Age comics and have the comic disassembled, the individual pages spend most of their time in this press. I put each page between a sheet of Strathmore Bristol paper. You have to get the smooth Bristol so you don't impart any pebbling into your pages. I use the 11 by 17 inch sheets because they can accommodate even the largest pages from the early Golden Age opened up flat. After episode 8, I dried the page, which went quickly because we only had our mended areas damp, and then it went into my cold press between 2 pages of the Bristol paper. I just pulled it out, and I'm really thrilled with the results. It's mended really solidly back into one cover, and everything is well aligned, which isn't guaranteed when your page is torn in half and you have multiple tiny pieces to mend back into one sheet. The inks are still bright and the paper is supple. The Tengujo paper repairs are nearly invisible. There's just a slight milkiness where the repair is over darker inks, but otherwise it's barely noticeable. I'm happy with my decision to put Japanese paper on both the reverse and the obverse as well. Although the Tengujo paper on the obverse of the cover does dull the ink a little bit on the left side of the front cover, I think what we gave up in appearance was well worth the peace of mind and stability of the repair and ensuring that all those tiny bits of paper along the spine are preserved for the next 100 years. Also, we had that small area on Pyroman's right thigh where we had some distracting glossiness that is completely covered now by our repair. Lastly, we demonstrated how to mend the page dry without getting warping, waviness, or cockling that often results when performing the mending of old documents with Japanese paper dry because of the differential expansion that results. Today, I'm just going to cut the excess Tengujo paper from the page. I'm using a number 3 scalpel with a number 11 blade, and this is important, a clear plastic ruler. You need to have a sharp blade and a straight edge that you can see through to ensure that you cut the edge perfectly. I've replaced the blade in my scalpel specifically for this job today. We'll be doing the cuts on this sacrificial cutting mat, and I'll be using my ring light with built-in magnification so I can see precisely where I'll be cutting. Believe me, CGC is using magnification to inspect your work. Your work needs to be able to stand up to more scrutiny than just that of the naked eye. I mentioned that I have a number 3 scalpel and I'm using a number 11 blade. I actually don't necessarily recommend the number 11 for this work. As you can see, it has a really sharp point, and I think a blade with a rounded edge is actually going to probably give you a better result. I just happen to have a whole box of these number 11s, and I'm using them up. I'm very comfortable with the scalpel and have used them on all kinds of projects, including surgeries. So I can use this number 11 effectively. If you're gonna buy, or even if I were gonna buy fresh though, I would probably buy a number 18 or a 20, 21, 22, something with a rounded edge here on this surface. That's just gonna give you a little bit easier time getting a nice smooth cut. All right, I guess I'll show you the back of this really quickly before we start cutting. Again, as I said, we get a little bit of milkiness here on the thick, dark black inks, but the strength that we have and what we gain in using this Tengujo paper, I think more than makes up for any slight appearance issues. And we're not trying to hide the fact that we're conserving this book. We're proud of the conservation work we're doing, and frankly, the book would not otherwise survive the next 100 years if we weren't doing some of this work. So I am absolutely fine with being able to see the Tengujo paper. As a matter of fact, one of the things we're gonna do is I'm gonna leave the paper in an area like this. There's a couple schools of thought on this. As I trim this edge, I could come in here and trim this Tengujo paper out and we would lose this sort of milky web here, right? That has a certain effect of making the repair a bit more invisible, and I don't blame anybody who takes that approach. For me personally, I'll take the extra strength here, and I'm just gonna cut this straight across. And again, I'm proud of this repair. I'm not gonna try to hide the fact that it's been repaired. And so that's the approach I take. I don't blame anybody who takes a different approach, but that's what we're gonna do today. All right, as I mentioned, I do have the ring light here, and I'm gonna be positioning the paper so that most of my cuts are gonna be right in this area here, which is gonna give me the best visibility through my magnification on my ring light. All right, let's get started. Now, you don't necessarily have to make these cuts all in one long go, but if you can, I think it is preferred. So again, I'm using the magnification to make sure that I am precisely lined up on this edge. I don't want to cut any of my existing paper off, but I don't want to leave a lot of Tengujo paper hanging out here. And when you have a nice sharp blade, it's as easy as that. And I'm looking at this through magnification, but I don't see any Tengujo here, with the exception of where there's a little bit of paper missing. There's a tiny bit of Tengujo right there. And it's as simple as that. I'm gonna go around and make all the cuts. I'm gonna pull toward me in every one of these instances, so I'm gonna continue to adjust the paper around. We talked about this in other videos, but controlling your breathing, having good ergonomics is absolutely critical here. And when you have a nice sharp blade, should not require much pressure at all. I'm going to do these long edges in 2 goes, maybe even more if I need it. I think I'm actually going to do this in 3 because I have a nice partially it was because we have this little area here on Doc Strange's shoulder. I just pull a little fiber off there. Very good. That is Doc Strange, right? Nope, we're going this way. All right, now as discussed, I'm gonna leave this up here, at least for now. I can always trim, like this one's a little different than the gap here between the two halves of the cover. I can come across this and trim it like that if I want at any point in the future, and I may, but for today, we're gonna cut it square. And this isn't doing anything out here, in contrast to this material is bridging this gap, right? This isn't doing anything out here, so I may trim that off because it is just a flap. But for the moment, I'm gonna leave it. Again, we're not burning any bridge to leave it there. We can always trim it off later. Now, from the factory, these pages don't always necessarily line up because when they get folded, they don't always get folded squarely before they get cut. So that's something I'm always mindful of when I'm cutting across the top of one of these. I think in this instance, it's close enough that I am gonna cut it, but I'll often cut from here out and from here out. Again, in this instance, we only have about an inch of Japanese paper, and I think it's very close to the two sides being parallel. So I am gonna go ahead and just cut this in one go across this joint. Beautiful. Oh, I really couldn't be happier with how this page has turned out. Really beautiful. Remember what we started with? Compared to what we started with, this is magnificent. All right, here again, one pull along the whole length. It's going to be the way to go. Should not require a lot of force with a nice sharp blade. And it didn't. Remember, I've already cut the top half of this, so I'm just going to catch it here. And that's what I mentioned before, how because these two bottom edges and the two top edges, they're sometimes like this or like this. You often can't get a straight edge across all of them. And that's, again, because of how they're cut at the factory. That's nothing to do with how they've been mended back together. So in this instance, I did, like what I traditionally do conservatively, which is pull half the page there, and then we'll get the other half here. And I have just a little bit here to correct where the angles were just off in the slightest. Okay. Well, let's have a look. I'm gonna move my ring lamp out of the way, and we'll have a look at this page. Well, like I said, I could not be happier. This page now is smooth, clean, flat. It's going to go together beautifully with its brethren. We whitened it up several steps. The darkest spot on the whole cover is down here, and I think it's still a little bit lighter than off-white. So I think this page is going to be either white or white to off-white. It's now durable, it's supple, it's going to go together beautifully with the rest of the pages. So I couldn't be happier with the outcome on this cover, and I really appreciate you joining me today for this relatively short video. we'll wrap it up here. So I hope you enjoyed this Golden Age conservation video. Most of the materials I used today, including the Bristol paper for the cold press, are available from Amazon in the affiliate links below if you need any of them for your own conservation efforts. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know below and tune in for the next episode in the process. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. And until next time, take care of one another.